When my husband asked for a divorce after 15 years, I nodded calmly and signed the papers. That evening, as he toasted his new beginning with his mistress at the rooftop bistro we once called our place, I approached their candlelit table with a smile. "Congrats on your freedom," I said, placing an envelope between the wine glasses. His smug grin collapsed the moment his eyes hit the DNA results. Crimson lipstick on a starched white dress shirt, that's what ended my marriage. Not a shout, not a scene, just the silent devastation of truth. I was paralyzed in our loft closet, holding Jonathan's shirt between shaking hands, its collar stained like a wound. I remember the exact time, what'd say, 8:46 a.m. Our twins Noah and Grace were at school, Lily at violin lesson. I was sorting laundry for the cleaners when I saw his gym bag stashed behind rows of designer boots. The zipper was partly undone, revealing the wrinkled shirt he'd worn to last night's so-called emergency consult. But that red wasn't from a patient. No surgeon walks into an OR with lips that shade of betrayal. Before we uncover more of Charlotte's discovery, I want to invite you to our storytelling circle. If stories of courage after betrayal speak to you, hit subscribe. It's free and help us amplify voices of women taking back their lives. Now let's see how this flawless life came undone. I stood frozen, heart pounding, realizing that 15 years of marriage had crystallized into one undeniable truth. Jonathan Reed, renowned cardiac surgeon, my husband, the father of our 3 children, had another woman's lipstick pressed against his chest. The illusion I'd lived in fractured like a champagne glass on granite. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years his colleagues at Clare's Memorial Hospital called us the Reeds of Fairhaven. Him, the miracle hands that saved lives. Me, the perfect partner who kept our family whole. Our brownstone on Sycamore Lane, with its boxwood hedges and climbing ivy, looked like something from a lifestyle magazine. "Charlotte makes it all possible," he'd say at benefit galas, arms slung around my waist, champagne in hand. I couldn't do this without her. The other wives smiled, but their eyes held envy. We had it all. 3 beautiful children, a beach house on the coast, a partnership I thought had weathered med school, residency, and his rise to chief surgeon, or so I believed. Looking back, the red flags weren't subtle. Jonathan started coming home later, citing emergency surgeries. Golf on Sundays turned into entire weekends away. Our conversations became bullet points. School pickups, grocery lists, holiday plans that always benefited his career. When he became chief of cardiology last fall, I threw him a garden party. He thanked me in front of everyone, then later snapped, "You made me look small in front of the board." That night he slept in the guest room. "It's the pressure," I told Rachel, my older sister, the next morning. "This role comes with expectations." She paused. "Men in power change, Char. Be careful." I waved her off. Her divorce had left her bitter. Then the distance turned physical. Jonathan blamed surgical exhaustion. When he flinched at my touch, I didn't get angry. I lit candles, bought silk nightwear, made dinner reservations. Everything the glossy magazines suggested. He barely participated. Checked his phone while we sat across from each other in elegant silence. "Are we okay?" I asked one night, as he pushed his favorite steak around the plate. "Just tired. The Jennings case is a mess." Then he vanished behind his home office door again, voice low, phone glow. I never checked his messages. That was beneath me, beneath Charlotte Hayes, the secure wife. The one who believed in privacy, until our 15th anniversary approached. I wanted to surprise him with a weekend in Savannah, where we'd honeymooned. Just needed to check his schedule. His phone was charging on the counter while he showered. One glance, just to confirm dates. That's all I meant to do, but the preview hit me like a slap. "Dr. Vanessa Cole, last night was everything. I still taste you. When are you leaving her?" My hand shook as I opened the thread. Months of messages. Hundreds. Photos. Hotel bookings. Plans made while I was driving Lily to rehearsals or helping Noah and Grace build volcanoes for science class. Cruel jokes at my expense. "Jonathan, she's planning some sappy anniversary surprise. Vanessa, poor woman, still thinks she matters." I placed the phone back exactly where I found it, made his espresso, kissed his cheek goodbye. He left. I turned and ran to the bathroom, and threw up until there was nothing left but bile and silence. That night, after the kids were asleep, I confronted him in our bedroom, the same room where we had dreamed of our family, where we had cried through miscarriages before turning to IVF, where he had held me while I mourned my father's death. "Are you sleeping with Vanessa Cole?" I asked. My voice was disturbingly steady. Jonathan didn't even flinch. He unfastened his watch, set it deliberately on the nightstand. Yes. How long? Does it matter? He looked at me with a coldness I didn't recognize. This wasn't a confession. It was an execution. I want a divorce, Charlotte. His tone was calm, surgical, precise in its cruelty. Why? I whispered. I've outgrown this life. Outgrown us. He glanced around the room as if it were a motel he couldn't check out of fast enough. I've given 15 years to this marriage, to these children. I'm 45. If I'm going to start over, it has to be now. Start over, I choked. We built this life together, Jonathan. Everything you are, everything I am, was built on this. He laughed, bitter and hollow. I save lives, Charlotte. Every single day. What do you do? Bake cookies for PTA fundraisers. Color code my sock drawer. You didn't build this. I did. Despite the anchor of domesticity, each word landed like a slap. I'd given up my teaching career, so he could chase med school. Managed our home, raised our children, hosted his colleagues, played the perfect surgeon's wife for the sake of his reputation. You'll be taken care of, he added, emotionless. Financially, I mean. The kids will adjust. They always do. He slept in the guest room that night. I lay in the dark, wide-eyed, replaying 15 years in my mind, like a documentary narrated by someone I no longer recognized. Had any of it been real? By dawn he was gone, off to the hospital as if nothing had happened. On the kitchen counter, beside his half-drunk protein shake, lay a business card for his lawyer. The life I thought we'd built, a mirage. The cracks had been there all along. I had just been too loyal, too blind to see them. What I didn't know then, was that the lipstick stain and the affair were only the beginning. Surface-level fractures in a foundation rotted from the start. Jonathan's betrayal ran deeper than infidelity, and soon, I'd uncover something that would make cheating look almost merciful. The next day, I scheduled a consultation with Catherine Blake, the most feared divorce attorney in Fairhaven. She specialized in high-asset dissolution, and was known to make grown men cry during mediation. Her first advice was simple but urgent. Document everything, Charlotte, especially the finances. That night, after the kids were tucked in and reassured that Daddy's just working late, I opened the safe in our bedroom closet. Inside was a decade and a half of records, tax returns, investment portfolios, deeds, retirement accounts. I pulled it all out, heart pounding, and the seams began to unravel. There were unexplained transfers, large ones, $5,000, $10,000, repeatedly, all going to an entity called Eastwind Holdings LLC. Over 2 years, more than $240,000 had quietly disappeared. No invoices, no explanations, just vanishing funds. I went to our bank the next morning. The account manager hesitated, citing confidentiality, but finally confirmed the truth. Eastwind Holdings was registered to Jonathan, and Jonathan alone, no cosigner, no shared access, just secrecy, neatly paper-clipped. Is this I asked Catherine during our follow-up, sliding the bank statements across her polished walnut desk. Hiding assets? Yes, but this, she said, examining the documents under her wire-framed glasses. This feels premeditated, strategic, long-term. It was during that same meeting that she said a name I hadn't heard in years. Dr. Ethan Moore. That ring a bell. Former colleague of your husband. Left St. Clair's about 3 years ago under murky circumstances. He's come up in another case of mine. Might be worth a conversation. I remembered Dr. Moore. Soft-spoken, always seemed a little out of place at hospital galas. Then, one day, he just vanished. I'd asked Jonathan at the time, and he'd brushed it off. Professional differences. It took 5 calls to locate him. He now ran a quiet family clinic, an hour outside the city. His receptionist was guarded until I mentioned Jonathan's name. The line went silent. Then she transferred me. Mrs. Hayes, said a voice on the line, steady but heavy. I've been waiting for your call for years. We met at a quiet coffee shop halfway between our towns. A neutral ground that smelled of dark roast and quiet regret. Dr. Ethan Moore looked older than I remembered. The confident posture I once saw at medical galas was gone, replaced by slouched shoulders and eyes that had seen too much. His hair had gone mostly gray, and the lines on his face looked etched by guilt. He ordered his coffee black and watched me with a gaze that was more clinical than personal. I knew this day would come, he said softly, almost to himself. I just didn't know which one of us would break first, me with my conscience, or Jonathan with his arrogance. What he told me next shattered whatever illusion of truth I had left. There was a problem at the St. Clair Fertility Institute, he began, voice barely above a whisper. Several couples started questioning failed IVF cycles. Cycles that on paper should have worked. I began reviewing lab reports and noticed irregularities, dates not matching, procedural codes altered, tiny inconsistencies, but enough to raise flags. I gripped my latte, untouched, my hands trembling. We went through 3 IVF rounds to conceive Noah and Grace. I murmured, another 2 for Lily. Every failure crushed us. Every success felt like a miracle. I thought so too, Dr. Moore replied. So I kept digging. And I found the truth. The clinic's director, Dr. Alan Whitmore, had been falsifying records, substituting specimens, inflating success rates, all to protect the clinic's reputation and secure funding. When I confronted him, he admitted it, but worse, Jonathan wasn't just aware, he was involved. No, I whispered, shaking my head. He wanted those children. We both did. Dr. Moore didn't flinch. He reached into his leather satchel and slid a thumb drive across the table. Hospital records, lab logs, signatures authorizing procedural modifications. That's how he phrased it, but it was specimen tampering, including yours. I stared at the small device, unable to touch it. Why? My voice cracked. Why would he do that? At first, career advancement. Whitmore was on the board that later promoted Jonathan to chief. But with your case, he hesitated. It's about control. Jonathan has hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, mild but genetic. There's a 50% chance he could pass it on. I blinked in disbelief. He didn't want to risk having children who might reflect poorly on his professional judgment. Dr. Moore continued. He made sure his sperm was never used. He selected anonymous donors, kept you in the dark. Every step of the way he knew exactly what he was doing. The realization hit like a tidal wave. I gripped the table to keep myself upright. I left the coffee shop with the thumb drive burning a hole in my handbag, and the name of a discreet, private genetics lab scrawled on the back of a business card. That night, once the children were asleep, I moved quietly through the house. I collected strands of hair from Grace's brush, Lily's toothbrush, Noah's hoodie. I even dug out an old comb of Jonathan's from the master bathroom, the one he no longer used. It was clinical, surgical, necessary. The 2-week wait for results was unbearable. Meanwhile, Jonathan was accelerating the divorce proceedings. He demanded a custody evaluation, claiming I was emotionally unstable. His lawyer sent me letters questioning my fitness as a mother, and implying I'd contributed nothing to the family financially. Then came the insult, a settlement that barely covered 6 months of groceries. It was a tactic, pressure me into submission before I could fight back. I played my part, smiled at drop-off, helped the twins build their science fair volcano, clapped at Lily's recital. When other moms asked about Jonathan's absence, I smiled and said, you know how hospitals are, always one more case. At night I buried myself in research, medical ethics violations, fertility fraud, case law. I read about doctors secretly using their own sperm, clinics swapping embryo, families discovering decades later that their children weren't biologically theirs. But never, a case like mine. A husband deliberately creating children that weren't his, maintaining the illusion of biological connection, all while manipulating the woman who trusted him. Then one Tuesday morning, the lab called. The technician's voice was cold, professional. We have your results, Mrs. Hayes. Would you like them over the phone or via email? Email, I whispered. I needed to see it. The report was clinical, but the meaning was unmistakable. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested children. Probability of paternity, 0%. I printed 3 copies, one for Catherine, one for the secure safety deposit box I'd opened in my name alone, and one that I tucked inside a cream-colored envelope, bearing the St. Clair Medical Center logo lifted from Jonathan's home office. The game had changed. He thought he'd destroyed me with an affair, but he had no idea what real betrayal looked like. And I was just getting started. During those weeks of pretending nothing had changed, my hands didn't shake anymore. The devastation had crystallized into something harder, colder. This wasn't about an affair or even about hidden money. This was about the theft of choice, the architecture of deception that had begun before Noah, Grace or Lily were ever born. Jonathan had robbed me of consent, of motherhood on my terms. He had created an intricate lie that shaped 15 years of my life. My role as a mother, my marriage, the very DNA of our family, all while presenting himself to the world as the devoted father, the noble husband, the gifted surgeon saving lives. The truth had changed. Now it was my turn to change everything for him. With the DNA results in hand, my grief hardened into precision. This wasn't revenge. This was demolition. Jonathan had built a false kingdom. I would tear it down brick by brick. I began by contacting other families who had undergone IVF at St. Clair Fertility Institute during Jonathan's time there. Dr. Moore provided a confidential list. 27 couples whose charts had shown procedural discrepancies. Most refused to talk. Some were too afraid. Others simply didn't want to disturb the fragile magic they had clung to for years. But 5 said yes. The Harrisons had twins who looked nothing like either parent. The Chaudery's daughter had a rare genetic condition that couldn't be traced in either bloodline. The Bennetts, Ortegas and Summers each had stories of miracle conceptions after multiple failures. Miracles that began the moment Dr. Whitmore took personal interest in their cases. "We were just so grateful," Emily Summers whispered through tears. "We never thought to ask how." The trail led next to Martha Quinn, a retired nurse who had worked at the clinic for over a decade. Her apartment was modest, tucked behind a pharmacy in a forgotten part of town. The inside, however, was filled with file cabinets, each drawer a quiet rebellion. "I kept everything," she told me, hands trembling as she pulled out a worn leather journal. "Every note, every form, every signature they thought I shredded." "Why didn't you report it?" I asked. Her smile was sad and hollow. "I did. I went to the hospital board, the ethics council, even the police. Every time, the investigation just disappeared." "Your husband has friends in very high places, Mrs. Hayes." She turned to a section marked with my name. The dates matched our IVF rounds. Exactly. Special instruction. Dr. Reed, specimen replacement approved. No donor identification. Quality concern. I couldn't breathe, but I took photos. Every page, every signature, every piece of damning evidence. Before I left, Martha pressed a card into my palm. "Medical Ethics Investigation Unit," she said. "Ask for Agent Price. Tell him I sent you." Agent Samuel Price worked with a joint federal task force focused on healthcare fraud. He met me in a secure government building, an unassuming suite above a tax office. His expression was neutral but focused. "We've been building a case against St. Clair Fertility for 18 months, he said. "But the internal wall of silence is thick. Your evidence might be the breach we've needed." He was cautious, methodical. "But we'll need more money trails. Proof of financial kickbacks. Witness testimony, especially from someone currently on the inside." "I'll get it," I told him, and I meant it. I returned to my life of carefully orchestrated illusion. At mediation I smiled wanly, agreed to temporary custody, nodded at his insulting financial proposal like I was too emotionally exhausted to push back. "You're being surprisingly reasonable, Charlotte," Jonathan remarked after a tense meeting, almost mature. "The kids come first," I said quietly. "I just want what's best for everyone." He bought it every word. His confidence grew with each concession I made. He began bringing Vanessa to school functions, introducing her as his partner. She smiled through clenched teeth, always watching me from the corner of her eye. Sometimes she even stayed overnight when the kids visited his new penthouse downtown. Meanwhile, I was building an arsenal. I took photos of documents he left on counters, forwarded emails when he forgot to log out. I recorded conversations, nothing obvious, just passing admission. Every giggle with Vanessa, every smug lie at the mediation table, every time he called me emotionally volatile or financially dependent. I logged them, saved them, time-stamped them. He thought I was defeated. He thought I was done. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't aiming for a fair divorce. I was preparing for a total collapse of everything he had built. My investigation took an unexpected and chilling turn when I hired a private investigator to dig into Vanessa Cole's background. The report floored me. She wasn't just Jonathan's colleague and lover, she was Evelyn Cole's daughter. Evelyn had been Jonathan's patient 5 years earlier, a standard aortic valve replacement that ended in tragedy. At the time, the official story was that Evelyn had failed to disclose a medication that caused complications during surgery. The hospital had conducted a brief internal review, then cleared Jonathan of all wrongdoing. But buried in the files Agent Price later uncovered was the truth. Jonathan had operated after returning from a weekend getaway in Chicago with Vanessa. He had slept little, ignored protocol, and made a critical surgical error. The records had been doctored. The family silenced with a payout from St. Clair's discretionary fund, and Evelyn's husband Vanessa's father died a year later from heart failure, consumed by stress and grief. Vanessa had been alone. She'd changed her name, wiped her history clean, then inserted herself methodically into Jonathan's world. First as a trusted coworker, then as his lover. Her revenge had been slow, strategic, just like mine. I considered confronting her, even teaming up, but Vanessa's motives were emotional, volatile, tinged with grief. Mine had to remain controlled, calculated, legal. Over the next month, I worked relentlessly. I interviewed former clinic staff, many of whom were reluctant but relieved to finally speak. I traced the money trail from St. Clair's accounts to Eastwind Holdings, and then to offshore banking systems registered in Jonathan's name. I collected sworn statements from affected families, parents who'd suffered miscarriages, medical complications, identity fraud. Agent Price was assembling a bulletproof legal case. I was building something different, something personal. A demolition plan for Jonathan Reed's carefully sculpted image. One day during a routine co-parenting drop-off, I saw the opening I'd been waiting for. We stood in the foyer, awkwardly negotiating after-school activities. When I said casually, "The twins have your eyes," he didn't look up from his phone. "Good genes. Do you ever wonder if they inherited your heart condition?" That got his attention. His head snapped up. "What heart condition?" "Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy," I said softly. "Dr. Moore mentioned it." His expression darkened instantly. Ethan Moore should keep his mouth shut about things that don't concern him. But our children's health does concern him. And, "There's nothing to worry about," he replied, brushing it off. "I had them tested years ago. They're fine." "You tested them, without telling me." "I'm their father. And a doctor. I made a medical decision. I recorded every word." His admission of the condition, his unauthorized medical testing, his continued lie that he was their biological father. That recording was the final piece Agent Price needed, the last nail in Jonathan's professional coffin, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect. The annual Claire Medical Gala was just weeks away, one of the most prestigious events in the regional medical calendar. Jonathan had been chosen as the Physician of the Year, honored for his extraordinary advancements in cardiac surgery and his unwavering ethical leadership. The invitation arrived at our home, still addressed to Dr. and Mrs. Jonathan Reed. A text followed. "I'll be bringing Vanessa as my guest, but of course you're welcome to attend, if it wouldn't be too uncomfortable." I responded with quiet dignity and surgical precision. "I wouldn't miss it. You deserve the recognition." What Jonathan didn't know was that I had already met, privately, with Dr. Helena Winters, the chair of the hospital board. I had shown her carefully selected pieces of the evidence, and in response, the board had called a confidential session for the night of the gala, 30 minutes before the awards ceremony. At that meeting, Agent Price would present the full case: the falsified IVF records, the financial fraud, the unethical substitutions, the misuse of hospital funds, the secret payouts to silence grieving families. Jonathan Reed had spent 15 years building a life of image, applause and reputation. In one evening I would watch it fall, and he would never see it coming. As I zipped up my dress for the gala, a sleek black column gown, Vanessa once mocked in a text as "suburban mom tries sophistication," my phone buzzed, a reservation confirmation from Vincenzo. Jonathan and Vanessa would be dining there after the awards ceremony. Our restaurant, the one where he'd proposed 15 years ago. It was the perfect final flourish. The symmetry poetic. The envelope was ready, cream-colored, embossed with St. Clair's logo, and containing the DNA test that would detonate the illusion he'd worked so hard to preserve. The authorities were in position. The board had been briefed. Every step had been mapped with surgical precision. For the first time in months, I felt calm. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Purpose. Jonathan had spent 15 years constructing a masterpiece of lie. Tomorrow night, the truth would reduce it to rubble. To rubble. The night of the gala arrived with cinematic timing. Storm clouds rolling over the city, thunder grumbling just beyond the skyline. I entered the grand ballroom of the Landsborough Hotel alone, my black dress absorbing the chandelier's light like armor. My hair was pinned back. Diamond earrings, once a gift from a man who no longer existed, glinted with every step I took. The room was a sea of tailored tuxedos and silk gowns, the air perfumed with wealth, ambition and pride. I spotted Jonathan near the stage, flanked by hospital board members. his arm draped casually around Vanessa's waist. She wore crimson, the same unmistakable shade that had stained the shirt that began all of this. They looked like perfection. He smiled. She sparkled. The doctor and his dazzling +1, none of them knew the board meeting had wrapped only 30 minutes early. I'd watched from a side room as Agent Price laid out the evidence. Financial records, patient testimonies, Martha Quinn's journal, signed in Jonathan's hand. The board members' expressions had shifted from confusion to horror to something colder: termination. Within minutes, the hospital's legal team had alerted the district attorney's office. Now plainclothes officers stood by each ballroom exit, waiting for Agent Price's signal. Jonathan, of course, remained oblivious, still shaking hands, still soaking in compliments, still playing the part. I made my way through the crowd with quiet grace. Colleagues' wives offered sympathetic smiles, their pity poorly masked behind designer mascara. "So brave of you to come," whispered Linda Monroe, wife of the chief of surgery, with the tone of someone watching a car wreck in slow motion. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, my smile cool and exact. "Jonathan deserves every bit of the attention he's about to get." She blinked. "Uncomfortable. Perfect." The ceremony began on schedule. The ballroom dimmed. Spotlights pooled on the stage as Helena Winters, chair of the board, took the podium. She said all the expected things: honoring excellence, celebrating legacy, reinforcing community. Then, with a polished smile, she introduced the honoree. "Please welcome our Physician of the Year, Dr. Jonathan Reed." Applause thundered. Champagne glasses clinked. Jonathan climbed the steps with practiced humility, trophy glinting in his hands. "Medicine isn't just science," he said into the mic. "It's trust, between doctor and patient. And trust is sacred. Ethics must guide every decision, every procedure, every moment in the OR." I watched Vanessa during his speech, the way her shoulders tensed, the tightness in her jaw. She was performing, just as I had, through fundraising dinners, gala speeches, infertility grief, and anniversaries he'd long forgotten. She met my gaze from across the room, and for a split second, something passed between us. Not forgiveness, not alliance, recognition. Two women who knew the truth about Jonathan Reed. Two women who had been used. Two women who were no longer silent. After the ceremony, they left for Vincenzo just as planned. I followed 20 minutes later, the cream-colored envelope tucked neatly inside my clutch like a final scalp. The restaurant hadn't changed. White tablecloths, soft lighting, the faint swell of Italian opera humming beneath the murmur of conversation. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Hayes, what a pleasure. Your husband mentioned you might be joining them." So Jonathan had told them to expect me. Either he was arrogantly confident, or staging some twisted public humiliation. Either way, it played perfectly into my hands. They were seated at our old favorite table by the window. Jonathan had ordered the 1982 Bordeaux, the one we shared on our 10th anniversary, a bottle that now sat between them like a monument to delusion, costing more than a month's worth of groceries for our children. Jonathan saw me first. His expression shifted from startled to smug, assuming I'd come to make a desperate plea, perhaps to win him back. Vanessa turned slowly, her beautiful face arranging itself into a perfectly sympathetic mask. "Charlotte," Jonathan said, voice drenched in practiced condescension. "This is unexpected, is it?" I stepped toward the table, calm, composed. "You told the maitre d' I might come." He waved a dismissive hand, a courtesy mention. "I didn't expect you'd actually show." Vanessa shifted, visibly tense. "Perhaps I should give you two a moment." "Please stay," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. "After all, you've earned your seat at this table, haven't you, Vanessa? Or should I call you Vanessa Cole, daughter of Evelyn Cole, the patient who died under Jonathan's scalpel?" The blood drained from her face. Jonathan's brow furrowed, confusion beginning to cloud his certainty. "What the hell are you talking about?" he snapped. "She knows," I said, still watching Vanessa. "Don't you?" I turned to Jonathan. "Evelyn Cole, your patient, the one whose routine valve replacement went catastrophically wrong after you returned from a weekend with her daughter in Chicago. You were exhausted, you made a mistake, and the hospital covered it up." Jonathan turned back to Vanessa, who now stared down at the table, her silence louder than any confirmation. Comprehension settled on him slowly, like the air leaving a punctured lung. I reached into my clutch and placed the envelope between their wine glasses. "Congratulations on your freedom," I said softly. "I think you'll find this enlightening." His hand trembled slightly as he picked it up. He opened it, read it, and I watched his expression mutate from mild confusion to disbelief, then horror. "This is impossible," he stammered. "Is it?" I asked. "You ensured your sperm was never used during our IVF treatments. You falsified medical records. You lied to me for 15 years about our children's very existence." Vanessa looked from the paper to him. "What is she talking about?" "Nothing," Jonathan snapped. "She's making this up. She can't handle the divorce." "Then you won't mind explaining it," I said calmly, nodding toward the entrance. "To the hospital board, or the district attorney's office, or to our children." He turned. There they were, Dr. Helena Winters, 2 hospital board members, and Agent Price standing just inside the doorway. Jonathan's face twisted, rage pushing through his mask. "You vindictive." "Choose your next words carefully," Agent Price cut in, stepping forward. "Jonathan Reed, I'm placing you under arrest for medical fraud, financial crimes, and ethical violations under the Medical Practice Act." The restaurant fell silent. Silverware paused mid-air. Conversation stopped. As the officer recited his rights, Jonathan stood frozen, too shocked to resist as his wrists were cuffed behind his back. "You've been planning this," he hissed as he was turned toward the exit. "All those months, playing the agreeable ex-wife." 15 years, Jonathan, I replied, my voice quiet but sharp as a scalpel. "You had 15 years to live your lie. I needed only 3 months to dismantle it." They let him out the same way we'd entered so many years ago. On the night he'd proposed. Vanessa remained seated, staring at her half-empty wine glass, her carefully curated composure unraveling. "I didn't know about the children," she said quietly. "I believe you," I replied. I paused, meeting her eyes for the last time. "Your mother deserved justice too." In the weeks that followed, the story detonated across both medical journals and mainstream media. Jonathan Reed faced multiple felony charges: medical fraud, falsification of records, financial crimes. His license was suspended pending trial. Claire Fertility Institute was shut down entirely, pending a sweeping federal investigation. Dozens of families came forward, desperate for answers about their children's genetic origins. Some were heartbroken, some were furious. All of them were blindsided. The financial consequences were swift. Jonathan's offshore accounts were frozen. A court-appointed forensic accountant traced every dollar he had funneled through Eastwind Holdings. Out of those recovered assets, a trust was established, one that secured Noah, Grace, and Lily's future in ways no child support agreement ever could. After Jonathan's preliminary hearing, Dr. Ethan Moore approached me outside the courthouse. "St. Clair is forming an ethics review committee," he said, "to oversee all reproductive services, when and if the clinic reopens." "Good," I replied. "It's long overdue." "They've asked me to lead it," he said, then paused. "Actually, I suggested we co-chair it." I blinked. "Me? Your insight, your experience, your voice. It would be invaluable." For 15 years I had been Charlotte Hayes, the surgeon's wife, the smiling host, the organizer, the shadow. Now I was being invited to step forward, not as an accessory, but as a force. 6 months after the gala, I sat across from Vanessa Cole at a quiet restaurant far removed from Vincenzo, the site of our last shared battlefield. Our unlikely alliance had formed during depositions, court proceedings, whispers outside federal chambers. 2 women, both deceived, both humiliated, both awakened. She sipped her tea in silence for a moment, then asked, "Do you regret it?" Exposing everything. Her eyes flicked to mine. "The children will know eventually. About all of it." I thought for a moment before answering. "They'll learn that their origins weren't what we believed," I said slowly. "But that won't change who they are or how deeply I love them." She nodded, but said nothing. The weight of that truth settled between us. "The foundation of their lives was built on lies," I continued. "But I chose the truth, however painful." That night, I returned home to our house. My house now still standing despite Jonathan's failed attempts to force a sale. I stood at the doorway of each child's room, watching them breathe in the stillness. Noah's arm thrown across his pillow, Grace curled in a blanket fort, Lily humming faintly in her sleep. And what I felt wasn't vengeance, not even triumph. It was liberation. The illusion of the perfect family, the white picket fence, the awards, the gala speeches, was shattered. But in its place stood something real, honest, unpolished, mine. For the first time in 15 years I was no longer living inside someone else's curated dream. I was writing my own story, messy, complicated, and absolutely unapologetically mine.